Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Ryan, and I am a managing director, executive coach, and advisor with Felix. We are delighted to have you all here today to hear our speaker, Deirdre Drake, who I will interview in a moment. But before we get there, just a couple of remarks. First of all, in case you haven't heard of Felix, but you probably have if you're here listening to us here today. You may not know the number of things that Felix offers. That includes HR consulting, recruiting, obviously coaching. We do outplacement. We do executive transition, executive in-position coaching. And one of the most interesting things that I think we've taken on in the last 10 years is helping people design post-corporate lives. And you know, we're talking to Deirdre Drake here today, who is in her post-corporate life. So that's very fitting. The other thing that we did some research recently, and we discovered that on the S&P 500, we've gone from 3% CHROs on boards to like over 30% of the S&P 500 boards have a former or current CHRO on their board, which is an interesting fact. And we're not here today necessarily to talk, you're not all CHROs, to talk about CHROs on boards, but as we listen to Deirdre's story and her journey, it is interesting to see that she's part of a group that was not on boards even 10 years ago and a big part of the boards today. Deirdre will tell us her story, but she has had an amazing career. Before board work, she was Chief People Officer at U.S. Cellular, a CHRO at the CHRO of BMO Capital Markets, and a number of other firms, and I'm hoping she tells us that story. And then since then has been on a number of for-profit and not-for-profit boards. And today our topic is just that. It is that journey and to see what we can learn from Deirdre as we go along. Format is I'm going to ask her some questions, and you've sent some questions that will work into that, and also at some point, we'll open it up in the chat to questions that we can ask. And we're going to wrap this up in about an hour. So if you've got your lunch with you, feel free to eat it. Stay on mute. We are recording this if you would like to take a look at it afterwards. But Deirdre, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us your story. And if you don't mind, start from the beginning. Where are you from? And then lead us up through your journey through an executive life and then to boards.
I'm going to do a check, make sure everybody can hear me okay. And then the next thing I'll say before I get into that is just I want to thank Felix for the opportunity to spend a little time with me talking about this. And I also want to thank in advance all the people who took time out of their lunch or pre-lunch or post-lunch hour to engage a little bit on this topic. So I would spend the whole hour if I started from the beginning, but let me just very briefly tell you that I'm from Flint, Michigan, born and raised. My father was an auto worker, worked for 34 years for General Motors prior to his retirement at age 55, which was part of the impetus for my drive for 55, which I did not make. I began my career with a company called Marathon Oil Company after graduating from Central Michigan University as an undergrad in 1989. So it's been a pretty long journey. My first executive appointment was in 2000. I was at that time in the Philadelphia area working for a managed services company. I started with that company in 1995 as a director and moved through the ranks and concluded my career there in 2006 as an SVP. So worked for 10 years for that company and left there to take on my first CHRO role. So I left there and moved to Chicago. At that point, I think that was the second time I lived in Chicago. I lived in Chicago off and on 3 times over the years. And I started with a financial services company there in 2006. Worked as the head of HR in the US, then proceeded to move to Canada for a couple of years. The firm is a Canadian-based firm based out of Toronto. Moved to Toronto for a couple of years to head up the capital markets division's HR department, and left that organization in 2014 to take on my final CHRO role with a telecommunications company in Chicago. So I moved back to Chicago for the third time and worked at US Cellular, which is the company, from 2014 until I retired from US Cellular in January of 2023. So had a pretty good run at 3 spectacular companies over the years in executive positions. As far as board appointments go, my first appointment was as a management director to the board of US Cellular, which is a little bit uncommon, and I'm happy to entertain any questions about that, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. Other than to say, when I decided to retire in 2023, the corporation asked me to stay on as a director. And for those of you who know about board governance, you can't be considered completely independent until you've not been in the employ of a company for 3 years. So I'm a non-independent board director of US Cellular, but I also am on the board of a corporation called TopBuild based out of Daytona Beach, Florida. And I was appointed to that board as an independent director in 2023. So we're rounding a year and a half there.
What is TopBuild?
TopBuild is a construction material and distribution firm. Over 30,000 employees, about $5 billion corporation.
Mm-hmm. When you finished your corporate career, was getting on boards were you intentional about that? Is that something that you wanted to be part of your life?
Actually, initially, no.
Mm-hmm.
I would say just the opposite. I thought about, I know I saw one of my good friends on the call that I walk with periodically, and I've shared with her that I've struggled with for a while toward the end of my career what exactly I was going to do. I didn't want to coach. That's kind of one of the typical paths that one could take. And I jokingly share with her that I've dealt with egomaniacal executives for 25 years, and I don't really want to do it post-retirement. But that isn't the path that I've chosen necessarily. But when I was approached by the leadership of US Cellular about being a management board member,
Mm-hmm.
is when it became really imperative for me to do some reflection as I was approaching retirement, to think about what was next. And for a number of reasons that they helped me understand, as well as me coming to terms with, around my career, leadership ability, the need for visibility when the opportunity presents itself so people can see people like me doing this work. They can be what they can see. It became really more important for me to think about public board service as a potential next step. So I got a bit more intentional about it.
And as you did that, did you think about what you wanted your voice to be or your brand to be on those boards?
I did. I had to. The board brand becomes a really important part of seeking out what the right opportunity is. So I think about the things that I did, crafting a brand. People talk about that. I don't know that I thought about it as specifically as a brand, but what I did do was I listened to and read a lot of thought leadership pieces and participated in sessions just like this one that other people were offering that allowed me to hone in on my ability to articulate and communicate what the transition differences are between management and governance. When I first began to embrace that notion, I was still working, of course. So the ability to articulate what's different about what I did as a member of management versus what I'm going to do or am doing as a member of the board became really critical, so people can understand that you have an understanding of the differences between those things. I then began to think about the narrative and the printed documents that would support the search, that highlighted my management, leadership, and the skill sets that I think I could bring to the role of an independent director, and also how prospective boards could benefit from that skill set. I tried as best I could to clearly articulate the areas of strength that I provide. So when nominating committees or search firms began to look at my background, they could juxtapose my skill set against their selection matrices to see if there was an opportunity.
Did you see yourself as a CHRO going on a board or a businesswoman going on a board?
The latter, and I would tell you, I didn't wake up in thinking like that. I came into it by listening to thought leadership and reading pieces and getting familiar with kind of how boards are thinking about what they're looking for. You know, CHROs have some obvious strengths around a broad range of complex human capital issues that their experience can provide some unique insight to. But it's really important for HR people to really, you know, when you think about it, one of the big distinctions that I like to make is that they don't need you to be the HR person on the board. They certainly appreciate your insights and the experiences that you have. But one of the key independent board member responsibilities around remuneration and compensation decisions. And they hire, most public companies are going to have an outside independent consulting firm that helps them with those things. They don't need you to do that. Again, your expertise is appreciated, but they're certainly not going to rely on you in that area. One of the other things I talk about or have spoken to people about relative to heads of HR on boards is, you know, you have a cadre of people in the C-suite that interact regularly with their boards. You, of course, your GC, who in a lot of times is going to be the corporate secretary or CFO for obvious reasons, typically going to work with more closely the audit committee than others. But then probably after that, and the CEO is the head of HR. The head of HR, as a normal course of their work, is dealing with the head of the comp committee. They're also probably interacting frequently with any independent consultants that have been hired by the board or the company to work through their remuneration issues. So the CHRO is the primary partner on this stuff. But as I look over kind of my 20 years of being in contact with boards, there isn't a committee that I haven't interacted with, whether it's the NomGov on CEO succession, whether it's an issue that has come up that you have to present to the audit committee or work with the audit committee on. And then, of course, as a normal part of your daily responsibilities, your work with the compensation committee. I've seen how boards function. I've seen how committees function. I've seen and interacted with chairs of those functions. We have a healthy view as heads of HR of what true governance looks like, how healthy boards conduct their business, and what the role of a good board member is. And I think all of those are attributes that add to the ability to consider and think about heads of HR for corporate boards.
Was there a time, and you don't have to name the board, where you got on the board and then said, whoa, they're going to really need some of my HR skills here?
I don't know if that's been the case. I've been very fortunate in that the comp committee chairs, even the audit committee chairs, most of the folks that I've worked on the boards with over the course of my career have been very engaging, have really looked to me for my perspective and insights about the business, in addition to the human capital issues that pose itself to the business. So they've been very, very good relationships. You know, for those of us who've, if you think about even not-for-profit boards, if you think about any kind of congregation of leadership, there are times when those things don't work optimally because you have people that don't understand team play. They need to be the smartest person in the room. Those types of opportunities to be better exist no matter what the circumstance when you bring a bunch of executives together. But most times organizations, boards, companies figure out a way to continue to move forward and draw the strengths out of that and not dwell on the opportunities that they may present. So it's been a really good experience for me.
Are there any particular executive skills or muscles that you should develop if you really are interested in getting on boards in the future?
I think general business acumen is going to be the most critical. There's so many things out there, and I think we're going to talk a little about kind of what I think are the presenting issues. But your ability to be, in addition to deep in your functional area of expertise and having the ability to offer those insights, but being broadly competent in a number of areas is going to be helpful. And to think about that, you know, one of the things that I share when I'm just generally talking to HR professionals is that if the opportunity presents itself to you, and if HR is your passion and you want to navigate your way back to HR, I would say explore other functional areas, become proficient in being a good business practitioner and not singularly focused. And that helps you regardless. That helps you as a C-suite leader. It certainly helps on boards. Again, I didn't, you know, early in my career, I just happened to be fortunate enough to work for a company that postured itself that way. And I remember sitting at the table early on thinking, okay, they're not just interested in what I have to say as an HR professional, they're interested in my thoughts. And then when the leadership team coalesces on what the path is going to be, then Deirdre goes back and does the human capital things associated with that, because that's my job. But that has carried on through my career, and I think is what has led to my ability to be successful as a C-suite executive and as a board member.
We at Felix in the C-suite advisory, we've worked with hundreds of senior executives, and almost every single one of them has said to us, I would like to do boards at some point. Not all of them had the interactions that you had with boards. Do you have any advice on things that those people can do to get ready?
Yeah, I do think they need to be diligent about seeking out the sources that help them differentiate. I don't know if it's that it's quite different than my story, because I actually didn't really think that I wanted to do this. So it's always interesting when I hear the counter to that. And it may be because of my exposure, having been around boards for so long, but I think people really think that it's an extension of the management work that they're doing, and to get really clear about what governance is versus what management is. And so when you're you know, less frequently exposed to the board, whatever the role you have may be, sometimes that distinction may get lost. So nobody's looking for the corporations' management teams are not looking for board members to micromanage them. So if you have to figure out a way to transform the skill sets that you bring to one of guidance and governance and challenging and making sure people have thought out their decisions, making sure that the management team can execute on the strategy, how do you inquire so that you can have comfort that what the company is saying it wants to do for a strategy is attainable with the team that they have in place? Are they addressing all of the externalities that potentially will impact their ability to be successful? How do you take your functional expertise, your leadership expertise, your executive expertise, and transition it to that posture? And I don't know that a lot of people really understand that nuance. So if you don't have a ton of exposure to the board, I would say go and research what it is that boards are supposed to be doing. Get affiliated with those organizations that provide you insights into what boards do, what's pressing for boards, how to be a good board member. I would take advantage of all of those resources if you are someone who is frequently exposed to a board. I think you have more insight about that line and what the difference is.
Right. We would advise our clients to look to take a board governance course. You'll not only learn some stuff, but if you're part of a cohort, you're also building a network, which is another very important aspect of getting on a board. Yes, recruiters do look for board people, but most board people get their boards and get that first board through networking. Is that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't mention, and I'm very proud of, is that Deirdre is on the Felix board as one of our advisors. Very proud of that. Let's talk about what's going on in the boardrooms at the moment. What are some of the key challenges and topics that companies are facing and that boards are talking about today?
There's so many overarching challenges. You know, coming back to the HR theme, I don't think there's a challenge that doesn't have some type of human capital implication. So once again, the skill sets of the CHRO can be helpful there. As you know, most issues in a corporation are going to impact either your customers, your employees. Most often it's going to impact both. You know, the things that come top of mind for me are the rapidity of technological change at the top of the pyramid in terms of what people are thinking about: AI, cybersecurity, data transformation, how they impact the workplace, the future of work, the people in the workplace. That is pretty much on every board's agenda. I think public company board in some form or fashion. Probably nearly as high on that list, though, are talent and culture. The link between what a corporation's strategic imperatives are and their senior leadership and employee capabilities and constraints. And then there's kind of the other host of issues that, depending on your industry or the industry of the corporation that you're serving as a board member on, that could impact your industry. Things like regulatory change, economic volatility, geopolitical instability, climate and environmental issues. They all make the cut in terms of what's out there and what's being talked about. Whether or not that's a challenge for you or an opportunity for you, I think depends upon what the company is and what they're doing. One of the things I have seen, though, over the course of, call it the last 10 years for me, though, is that you see kind of human capital implications and context threaded through all of those issues more frequently than I would say I did earlier in my career. Pretty much every topical area has some HR implications, and that's brought to light usually in the discussions. And that to me is a more recent development.
Can you talk about that first board that you were on? And I'm kind of thinking about that the brand, the voice part, and so on. What were your first observations?
Well, I think let me tackle that a little different, because the U.S. Cellular, again, the opportunity to be on the board of the company that employed you is not all that common. I don't know that it's never heard of. It's been heard of, but not all that common, other than for the CEO.
Other than the CEO, right?
Yeah, other than the CEO, I would say. So needless to say, I was pretty humbled when I was asked to stay on, and actually even to serve as a management board member. But I'll think about TopBuild, and you know, they were so thoughtful and so thorough in assessing my qualifications against their needs. It's a small board. A small powerhouse board that gets a lot of work done. And they didn't need or want someone who was going to be counterproductive to what was a really good relationship between the CEO, the management team, and the board. So they were extremely thoughtful. And so I was optimistic and excited about the opportunity to contribute. But I just remember even saying to myself in the boardroom, the first board meeting with that company, like, watch, listen, use your eyes and your ears 3 to 4 times as much as you're going to use your mouth in the 4th session, because as much research as you've done about this corporation to get ready to be a productive member of the board, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what I would tell anyone going into it. They definitely, corporations pick you for board opportunities because they believe you have value and something to add. But I do think that you need to also make sure that you understand, you've gone through the board orientation, you know what the company is doing, you know where they're headed, you understand the relationship between the board chair, the management team, the CEO, and the rest of the board. so that your contribution can be optimal. And no different than I tell people when they go into their first VP role or their first director role, like, shut up for a little while and figure and watch what's going on, before you add to the discourse. But at a point, you do need to wade in, because that's what they brought you here for.
Right, right. But it's okay to listen at first.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And not just okay, but imperative, right?
Yeah.
Boards today are no longer rubber stamping boards. They bring with them a very high level of fiduciary responsibility, and to a certain extent, personal risk. How do you think about that, Deirdre?
Yeah, it's out there. You think about just being true to your obligations and your duties of loyalty and care. You are brought on to ensure that the management team is making sound strategic decisions that postures all of the stakeholders in the corporation for success. That's your role. And to make sure that you have enough inquiry and enough comfort that the risks that they are taking, the path that they are taking, is in the best interest of all those shareholders and stakeholders. And when you do that, you've done what you can do. So the notion that someone may sue you along the way, as long as you've done it, we live in a litigious society. People are always going to potentially question the decisions of companies, their leadership, directors. But as long as you've done what you know is the best path, and you've been true to your duty of loyalty and care,
Yep.
I don't worry about it.
I also see from your background that not-for-profit boards have been a part of your life as well, with the Red Cross and also the Chicago Public Libraries, for example. Can you talk about that experience?
Sure. I figured out probably around 2006 or so, kind of the passions that I had in thinking about getting more honed in on moving forward with not-for-profit work that supported my passions, which were children primarily and underserved communities as a part of that. And those two organizations, along with others that I've been on advisory boards, Jackie Robinson Foundation, UCAN, along the way, are supportive of that. So one of the things I've been very proud of is my ability to do well personally by being a senior leader, but to take my doing well and do good for these organizations by using my time, my talent to help support the organizations. When you mention the American Red Cross and the Chicago Public Libraries specifically, those are boards that I've been affiliated with, I think from 2006 for the Red Cross and 2014 or so for the Chicago Public Library Foundation. They also are wonderfully run not-for-profit organizations with amazing governance structures. They have committee structures. They run their governance almost as if they were public companies. So there are committees that I've been able to chair or be a part of over the years that affords you the opportunity to hone your skills in those areas as well. So just they've been world class for that purpose, as well as the fantastic work that they're doing.
I've got a couple more questions about the not-for-profit, but before I do, I'm going to ask questions of Deirdre for about another 10 minutes. But if anybody wants to throw questions into the chat, we can pick that up in about 10 minutes. Talk about the difference between your experiences in the not-for-profit board and the and corporate boards.
That's a good question. The focus tends to be a little bit different when I think about the not-for-profit boards, in particular, those that rely on, when I think about, for example, the Red Cross. And I served on the board of the Red Cross in Chicago up until about a year ago, and now I'm on the National Philanthropic Board for the Red Cross. And we actually just met in DC last week we have a couple meetings a year in DC. their focus is mission supported. So they're certainly our stakeholders, but a lot of times when you have an organization like the Red Cross that is so reliant on and survives on ensuring that they have the contributions of others, that changes kind of the focus of how the board is put together and what they're designed to do, and how the philanthropic board is they're designed primarily to assist all of the regional chapters in their fundraising. So this is an organization whose well-run financial fundraising machine is critical to its mission of helping people at their worst possible moment, right? So that's a little bit different than overall governance structures that you see in a corporation. So, but I would tell you that in the case of both of those organizations, they have governance committees. There's a senior leadership structure. They have investment committees in the case of the Chicago Public Library Foundation that manages its the corpus assets that it receives and make sure that they're being invested wisely. There's marketing committees, there's HR committees on a couple of those boards. So they run similarly, but all in support of kind of different work.
As you think of the different boards that you've been on, obviously there's a board meeting with a certain cadence. That might be a day or half a day. There's the preparation, lots of reading, I would imagine, and hopefully getting that in advance. What else? Do you feel like you get the opportunity to mentor people in the company? What other things go with being a board member for a company?
Yeah, that depends, and I think it varies, but I think mentorship is another good it's another good opportunity for a board member to lean in with their expertise. And sometimes that probably affords you the ability to lean into your functional expertise a little bit more. I think about, I'll step back for a little bit into when I was a CHRO at US Cellular. One of the things that I probably was most proud of was my ability to set up a board mentoring program. So US Cellular is a part of a holding company that also has a board, TDS, and each of those board members were paired with members of our senior leadership for mentoring purposes. So we tried to ensure that those board members got good exposure to our senior leadership team. It's mutually beneficial, right? So they get to share more personally and in depth their experiences and guide and advise some of the senior leadership team members. It gives them the opportunity to see the senior leadership team members outside of the boardroom or board dinner setting, which is most often when you interact with the senior leadership team. So it is another really, really good opportunity. One of the other things that I really enjoy doing as a board member is going out and seeing the operation and having the ability to do that unencumbered and oftentimes without people knowing who you are. So you can see, and we would afford for example, at US Cellular, we would afford board members that opportunity on the regular to go into our retail store so they could see and be more connected to the work that the organization was trying to do so that they could be more effective as board members by having experienced the products or services. So that's also another good way for board members to lean in.
When you think about the cadence of board meetings, boards get together 4, 6, or maybe more times a year, but they're not together all the time. How does a board develop its personality or culture?
It is by maximizing the time that you are together, and it starts with having made good decisions about the composition of the board in the first place, right? And ensuring that you have enough diversity of perspective, enough diversity of interests, but all with the same goal of being of support to the organization. So I think about what I consider to be a really good relationship with the board members on both of the boards that feeds itself into the board meetings because it was carefully crafted that way to begin with. But you do get to maximize the opportunity through dinners and other informal opportunities. If somebody's in town, if they come this way, you get to interact with them informally, or there have been times when management team members have been in the area and they'll congregate the board members who live in this area so that we can get together to see some part of the operation. So there are other opportunities that lend itself then to healthy discourse or to the culture in the boardroom.
One of the questions that just came in on chat was, how do you handle situations where you find yourself in opposition or disagreeing with the CEO?
You just do. There's a respectful way to do that. A lot of times when people say, contrary opinion or conflict or things like that, people view those terms negatively, but I think there is a respectful and appropriate way to lean into those discussions when you don't agree. I will reflect on a retirement party that was thrown for me, and I think 3 former CEOs joined the party. And one of the things that they talked about was that I had a way of letting them know when I did not agree with what they were doing, to provide insight or perspective that would cause them to think, and oftentimes modify, if not completely change, the way they were thinking about something, and the outcome ended up being better. I'll take this opportunity, if you don't mind, Bob, to share something with you. I gotta find it here. I recently had the opportunity to be honored by an organization for my board service. And as a part of that honor, the board of one of the companies I was working with was questioned about me. And this is what they said. They said, Deirdre has a strong business acumen and will readily challenge positions and decisions when she has a contrary point of view. She consistently brings a balanced perspective to our business and understands the criticality of engaging and motivating our team. She has such a depth of knowledge, but more importantly, she has a natural, values-based, instinctive, and intuitive approach to problems and people. And I can't ask for more than that. And I believe that board members are not there to just go along to get along. They're there to challenge and sometimes not agree, to help the CEO navigate through or think through complex and thorny issues. And that means that we don't always agree on how to approach things, but to do that with respect, to disagree respectfully, to get to the best outcomes for the company.
How do you prepare for a board meeting?
There's a lot of reading. You ideally get your materials 1-ish to 2-ish weeks in advance, depending on what, like strategy materials you're going to get earlier, but general course materials are usually about a week in advance. And to take the time to lean into them. One of the things I like to do is to think about continuity. So I pull the documents from the meeting before because there should be some continuity of how you're thinking about things and what was said, what's happening, to make sure that that flow is there so you can isolate or question any changes that seem to occur from one piece to the other, but to make sure that you're reading information about competitors, that you're reading analyst reports, that you understand consensus, that you know what the corporation is trying to do strategically. There's work. There's more than a nominal amount of work that goes into being on a board, and that goes back to the comment you made earlier about everybody wants to be on a board. If you're working, like I don't know that I would have tried to sign up to do another board and be on the board of US Cellular while I was working. So maybe one, but it's a lot of work. And if you're in a C-suite, that's a lot of work on top of a lot of work.
I do think there's a tendency sometimes to think about the board dinner and the board meeting. So, okay, so that's a day and a half, 4 times, 6 times a year. How many days do you spend preparing?
It depends. So when skies, I'll use a Red Cross term. When skies are blue and everything's going according to plan, I try to spend a few days in advance of the meeting once I receive the materials, going through the materials, reading the analyst reports, looking at competitive data, all of those things. But who's operating in a company where the skies are always blue? There's always something, any kind of event, a cyber attack, active shooter, a change in the CEO, a merger, an acquisition, all of those things increase the amount of time that you're going to devote as a member of the board. That it always is going to be something extra, unless you work for one of those boring companies on the board of one of the most boring companies on the planet. There's always something going on that's going to take time above and beyond your quarterly board meeting, and you have to be sure that you've signed up to take on that extra load, especially if you're working.
Just changing gears here a little bit, I would imagine you've served on multiple committees. What's been your favorite?
You know, this is a controversial answer, and it's funny because people laugh at me because as a non-independent board member, I get to move around pretty freely on the U.S. Cellular board, and I try when I can to participate in the audit committee meeting. People hate audit committee meetings, by the way, because they tend to be long and laborious, but I love it. And then on the TopBuild board, all of the board members are on every committee. So once again, I get the exposure to the audit committee, and I really, really enjoy it. The HR committee, comp committee, however corporations choose to name it these days, that of course is near and dear to my heart. But I think the audit committee is one that gives you kind of a fulsome view of kind of everything that's going on in the organization.
As you've probably been part of selecting other board members. As you've been a board member, whether that's nominating committee or as a member at large, what do you look for, first of all, in a practical sense, from a collateral, what resumes and so on, what does that look like? And secondly, what are the attributes that you look for when you're looking at someone to join you on your board?
Yeah, it's going to vary, right? So that's actually back to the other comment about, because the things I've heard people say is, I want to be on the board of this company. Well, who do you know over here? So when they have an opportunity, I can be, that specifically, because they want to work in something they may see as more exciting or sexy or whatever. That's not how it works. The nominating and governance committees have a matrix of skills that they are looking to fill in. And as board members roll off, or their term limits, for those boards that have term limits, or something happens and they need to add to the board or make some changes, they have to fill in a specific set of skills that comes in this matrix. So that may be that they're looking to have someone with compensation experience. They may be looking for someone who has regulatory experience. They may not have enough board members who have industry-specific experience and may need to round that out. So it is circumstantial when the opportunity presents itself, right? So I think about even U.S. Cellular as an example, found itself a number of their board members who were industry-specific retired. And so they needed to add some folks that had telecommunications experience to the board. And that's not always easy because you run into conflicts and all of those potential things. So you got to be thoughtful about that and where you go to get that talent. So it really becomes circumstantial. But then once they decide on what they're going to look for, to be thoughtful with the firm that they're using or the sites that they're using to call, to make sure that people have articulated that they have expertise in those areas, whether it's I don't think any board right now is going out specifically saying, I need an AI expert on the board, because that's so rapidly changing that if you hire the person today, those skills are going to sunset. You typically would hire someone else to do that. But you may want to have someone who has that in their background because it lends some unique perspective. So how then do you call that out of people's documents that they craft with their board narrative? So that's how you think about that.
I have a question around if you could say more about the difference between management and governance and maybe provide an example.
Yeah, so a lot of inquiry is what comes from board members, right? So the board is going to question and ask the third and fourth question to make sure that you're thinking through things. They're not going to tell you what to do. Right, that is the biggest example. Or they may share with you. I was listening to I'm in Dallas and the Mavericks are in the NBA Finals. Go Mavericks! And one of the things the players say they appreciate so much about Jason Kidd is he doesn't tell them what to do. He tells them what he might do if he were faced with a similar circumstance. And then he affords them the latitude to make the decision themselves. And that's the difference between management and governing or coaching, right?
Right. And in fact, that's the difference of how you need to think about being a board member, is that you're looking at things from a different level.
Yes.
I know we've heard fingers out, nose in.
Yeah,
right?
nose in, fingers out, nose in, fingers out. Be
Yeah.
nosy, be inquisitive, ask a million questions, make sure you're comfortable with the thought that went into the strategy, the approach, the team, the people who have to execute, but you don't get to make those decisions for the CEO. You don't.
Right, right. You find yourself, you have to, you've been an operator for so many years. Do you catch yourself sometimes wanting to like give advice or something that might be more managing than boarding?
There's a way to approach it that helps people realize that there are other alternatives. Have you considered? Have you thought about? What do you think about? It all comes in the inquiry to let people, you're signaling that you're not necessarily lined up 100% with perhaps the approach, and that there may be some other things they need to think through without telling them what to do.
Right. Right. Deirdre, could you talk about the difference between a public, private, and private equity board service?
So say more.
So let's take a private equity board, advisory board. That is fairly different than a public board in terms of its responsibilities and so on.
Yeah, a private company or a company that doesn't have to report out to the street certainly doesn't have the same obligations around, meeting some analyst expectation of how they're supposed to perform financially. So it just creates a little more freedom. I've had the benefit of working for a company that was private that went public. So when I started work for ARAMARK in 1995, it was private, operated like a public company, just didn't have the same pressures that the street placed on it, right?
Yeah.
Went public in 2001 and could not manage that pressure. And about 6 years later went private again. They're public again now. But there's certainly some differences in how you think about your stakeholder base and the risks you take and what's acceptable in terms of returns and all of those things when you don't have to answer to the street. Street has additional pressure.
Another question from our audience. You've worked with large boards, more than 10 people, and smaller boards. What are the hazards and benefits of each?
You don't want your board to be too big because it diffuses the discourse and you can get lost and not focused, right? So you have to be thoughtful about what the right size of your board is as your company's in juxtaposition to your company's size, right? Mm-hmm. And what skills you need to be able to effectively govern. So sometimes that drives a wider swath if you're in a bigger company like ARAMARK is one of the largest companies in the country, so it has a larger board. But when I think about a nice compact powerhouse board like TopBuild, is that everybody gets to lean into every issue. We're on every committee. It streamlines the board meetings because I don't have to regurgitate for the board members that aren't in the committee meetings what happened in the committee meetings. So that tends to be a little bit more effective from our perspective, but it isn't always possible if the board is large to do it that way. So there's benefits to a larger board gives you different perspectives, the ability to lean in more closely to the management team from a number of directions. So there's pros and cons to both.
I've heard that board work is described as 1/3 joy, 2/3 hard work, and that might flip in a not-for-profit. What gives you the joy? What's the part you really like, Deirdre?
I love the enthusiasm that management teams have about the work and the companies. I've had the benefit of working for companies that, in some cases have altruistic purpose and have enabled a structure that allows them to do good as a corporation and still meet the needs of their stakeholders. There's other companies that the management team is just so excited about what is growth, like the TopBuild board is a company. The company has grown exponentially since it spun off from it's a company called Masco in 2015, and just watching the excitement of that leadership team as they think about what their future holds. All of those things give me a good amount of joy. You know, what I'd say there too is actually another point about board service. I think I read recently that the average board tenure is somewhere between 7 and 10 years, somewhere in there. And some boards now have term limits, that kind of thing. That's a long time to be miserable. So I would say be very thoughtful about the boards that you're going to be on, and don't just jump on a board because the board said they wanted you. When I finally decided that I was going to do this, I actually walked away from a couple of opportunities because when I researched what they were doing, how they were approaching things, the composition of the board, the CEO board chair relationship, those were things I didn't want to wade into because I didn't think it would be productive for me or make me happy. So you got to make sure, I'm not going to suggest that every moment is a moment of joy, but you better be thoughtful about where you're going to spend the next 7 to 10 years, because it's not something that you can't just after a year or two, like you may be able to do in a corporate environment, say, you know what, it doesn't work for me, I'm going to walk away. That's not a good look. You want to be there long-term to see what the outcome is going to be. So just be thoughtful about the choices that you make.
Last question from the audience, and then I have one follow-up after that. Were there any unexpected challenge in transitioning from management to a board member?
No, I don't know if there was anything unexpected. Because I had been so involved at US Cellular in the board structure, so there weren't really any surprises when I got to the other outside board. But sure enough, there's going to be things that come up that are going to be, maybe you signed up for something and something changed, you know, and maybe you signed up to be on a board because when you met with the CEO, and then the next thing you know, the CEO changes, you know, life happens, things change. So you got to be prepared for that. But I sat ready to accept any changes that might come, but nothing really surprised me out of the gate.
As you, my last question before we wrap up, as you look towards the next year, what are the things that you're looking forward to that might not be related to board work in your life?
Oh, that's easy. So I've been retired since January of last year. So I rounded a year in January, and I've said to myself, you're going to tackle a number of things that you never had time to do when you were working. Two of those things that kind of, you know, stick out for me are I want to be a better baker. I want to hone my baking skills. So I've started to take a bunch of elevated baking classes. I'm still no good whatsoever. So I'm still working on that. And the other thing is something that I've never done, but for whatever reason, I have an interest in. I recently just signed up to take a class in woodworking. So before it's over, I plan on having a little wood shop out in the back of my garage, but I'm
fantastic. Deirdre, on behalf of the Felix team and all of our guests here today, thank you so much for sharing your experience and knowledge with us. We have recorded this, so there are some people that will be able to watch this that weren't here today. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Everybody have a great day, great rest of the week, and a safe month. Bye-bye.
Everyone.